Hello there reason people, PoohBear here and welcome to my channel, and today we're going to be looking at Linode Live, sorry about the accent, and their set CV out. I've just recently released another video to do another one of their products called the Select program, and the funny thing is this program, this device led me on to their other devices. I remember when their devices all came out, I had such a quick look at them, and I just parked them to one side. I never really revisited them. But this particular device caught my eye is because I've actually even spoken to devs about building something pretty similar to this. We've had that Select CV switch, which has appeared in many of my videos, and I've always wanted the reverse. Obviously, the Select CV switch is 8 in to 1 out, and we've got this device which we could configure as a 1 in, 8 out. I know if you go online and actually have a look at the documentation, they talk about 2 in, 16 out, because that is true. But we've got an A and B rows, so in fact, I'm only going to stick to the A row, because really, I could actually configure this up, not just as a 1 in, 8 out, I could configure this up as a 1 in to 128 out. And actually, with a little bit of other configuration, that 128 could double, quadruple, be as big a number as your system could handle. But let's just stick to one device, keep it nice and simple, and as I say, we'll talk about the A ports, which is a 1 in, 8 out sort of configuration. Now, what makes this device so exciting to me, say for starters, let's look how I've got this configured. At the moment, I've got this configured as a classic demultiplexer, which would be 1 in, and it will switch between 8 different ports. And this is a configuration I know I'm going to be using a lot. Why? Well, I built my own demultiplexer many years ago, and I actually even done a video on it, and here it is. It's quite straightforward to use. As I switch each of these, I've got one LFO coming into it, and I've got it going to 8 different ports, and I can switch between those 8 different ports. Every time I switch it, you can see the colors are changed, which means it's on a different port. Nice and simple. And in fact, if we scroll down, this is what's doing the donkey work. So it happens to be, you can think of it as a diagonal matrix going across. This matrix itself can be a complex matrix, because you can have multiple different ins to outs, and I will admit I built this going back a few years now, and it was when we had the original colors of the Select CV switch. Thank you very much, obviously, Robotic Beam, for giving us this as a freebie, because it's appeared again, as I said, in so many of my videos, and it's got me out of a lot of trouble with this little device. I absolutely love it, and these two appear in a lot of my videos, the CV8X4 and the Select CV switch. Anyway, quickly, let's stay focused, PoohBear. So yeah, so it's just doing this fancy switching. So why am I even bothering showing you this? Well, if you hold down the Alt key, and it'd be the Option key on the Mac, and click, you expand absolutely everything inside the combinator. And if we switch to the back, just look at all this lovely wiring. Oh, I'm starting to drool. We have all this lovely wiring, all this lovely stuff. And if I zoom out, so all of this here, all of this lovely stuff has been replaced by this. One device has replaced all of this lovely stuff. But guess what? I am so happy to have this one device replace all that stuff. It's going to make wiring so much easier. Yes, you could say, well, I've built a combinator, I don't have to worry about it too much, and it's quite simple to put things in and out. But when we're building new things, just having one simple device like this doing what that was doing, it's a godsend. That's the way I look at it. This is a real sort of godsend. In fact, I'm going to click on it and I'm going to delete that. Let's get rid of that. It's gone. Whoa, we only need this. But as I said, I've actually got this set up as a demultiplexer, and in the state it is. But it's not just that. It's not just a simple 1 in and we can switch between 8 out. In fact, I'm going to reset this device. I'm actually running a Zoom It program, so you might see the screen moving around as I move my mouse, because my mouse, when it gets to certain edges, it moves around. So now, when we reset it, this device is acting as a pure splitter. It's a 1 in and it's split it to 8 different outs. Obviously, if I wired out the ports. So, yeah, we got the spider for that. So we could use the spider. No need to use this. But we can obviously do some magical things with this, which makes it a bit special. I'm just going to... These are the program numbers. In my own head, I think of these as separate channels because when you actually start stacking a real lot of these, and you can stack a real lot of this sort of stuff, you know, it can start getting very, very complex. So starting to think about them as separate channels rather than ports and things, it makes it a little bit more sense. But I'm just going to just put these numbers together and you'll see what's going to happen in a minute. And let's put that to 3, say, and then we put that one to, it doesn't matter if I put that to 3 or 4, let's put it to 4. At the moment on program 1, so my input is going to go out of channel 1 or port 1, which happens to say 0. So it's all a little bit confusing what we're looking at. And by the way, the reason the programs here go from 0 and this program number actually goes up to 127 is, as I say, Linode Live. And if you listen to the name, and I know I've got a terrible accent, the live bit is they've designed all their products because they're, well, obviously they were using Reason Live, they was hitting on restrictions, or that, you know, they wanted to do something and they couldn't find the right rack extensions to do it, so they've actually built their own, and so they based everything around the MIDI standard. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. We're not using it live. I'm going to be using it for all sorts of things. But actually, it's funny. The main place I'm going to be using this in is going to be something like a Generative project, and really at the end of the day, you know, Generative project is just as live as someone playing live. It's the computer generating stuff. Anyway, don't digress. So we're on program 0. So my signal in is going to go out number 1. Quite straightforward. I can now switch on to program number 2. That signal now is now switched to these 2 ports. So I'm actually sending it out 2 ports now. And if I go to program number 2, I happen to configure it to go out 3 ports. And then all of a sudden we go into program number 3, and I've only configured it to go out 1 port, and the same with program 4. So you can start seeing it's not just your straightforward splitter now. It's quite a nice kind of configuration. And as I said, because you're not really limited to 8 ports, as you saw how I duplicated the devices, you can actually start setting yourself up a very, very quite complex matrix. Let's switch around to the back and we'll have a look on the back and see if there's anything special on the back. Oh, sorry, I double tapped my foot pedal. Maybe we should do a video about my setup, because I actually use foot pedals and I convert the MIDI data into keystrokes. And so I can control things like the tab key, and this particular program, I've got zoom in. So I'm using the zoom program as well. So what we have, this particular input here is actually to do with the knob on, well, actually this one doesn't have a knob on the front. The select program one does. So it will actually operate these 2 buttons. So rather than having to click up and down on these buttons, we could actually give it, and actually, why not stop saying it? Let's actually go and do something. Let's go and grab something. Hey, I'm going to go and grab an Arcus for this. And the reason I'm going to grab an Arcus is because I can actually configure this thing to be unipolar and switch around the back. Sorry, I knew this was going to happen with the foot pedal. I want that, and I'm going to put that into my selects in. So I'm now going to use a knob to change the program. But obviously, as you can see, this knob is going to go all the way up to the 127 and all the way down. So selecting precise numbers, you're going to have to be very precise. But thankfully, with the Arcus, what we can do with the Arcus, I'm going to push this all the way out so it's up to the very highest it can go. And by using this, and I'm just dragging this down, you can see I'm putting the program numbers down, and I can configure it so there's only, I think I need to go down to 7, don't I? Because it's from 0 to 7 would give me the 8 ports. So now when I use this, I can be very, very specific. It's a lot easier to dial the numbers in. And if I click on this and just duplicate a couple, as you do, there we go. And I'm going to switch around to the back, and I'm just going to take this through, and I'm going to put it into this select in. I'm going to take this through, put it into the select in, take this through, put it into the select in, switch around to the front. And now when I move this one knob, we change all the programs. And I haven't, because I duplicated it, all the ports were duplicated as well. But there's nothing stopping me coming here and making this like, you know, they could be, you can do whatever you want, you know, the port numbers. I think you get the idea about that. But it's the fact that you can now start to stack them. You hopefully can start to see, actually, this is actually a very powerful way of the way we can actually work this. And by the way, as I say, on their other devices, they have this program as well. And they seem to have, this same sort of setup. So you could take this through and go straight into one of their other devices. So when you're changing the program here, it's actually going to change it on one of their other devices. And again, rather than me actually saying about it, let's actually quickly find one of the devices. Where are we? Leonard Live. There's a select program. And zoom in. I'm going to now put that into the through, back to the front. You can see this is now on program number 2. And as I push it up, these change, and this changes. So it's great that all their sort of products kind of integrate, and so when you're changing one, you're changing everything else. And this one happens to have a select button on it. But again, I found the select button has quite a quick throw. So when you're trying to get very specific numbers, obviously the up and down work very, very well. But I find using something like the Arcus to actually, especially as we're only switching between the 8 ports, is really nice and flexible to do. So it gives me a big throw, which means it's easy to dial in the numbers I'm actually looking for. Whereas if I'm going to have to hold the shift key down just to change it or something. So this makes it nice. Digressing as usual. So let's just clean some of this up so we don't get too messy on the screen. And let's just move my mouse over here. So we're over here. So where were we? We was on the back, weren't we? We was talking about the back. So that's what that select in's for. So this is our box standard CV in. From the CV in, we've got ourselves a through. So again, exactly the same as this. I could duplicate this and I could take this through and put it into the next one and next one, next one. If your device doesn't have a through, make sure you update it. Well, when this device came out, the throughs weren't there and these little knobs weren't there. And I actually contacted the dev and I said, oh, it would be really nice if we had some throughs so we could link daisy chain these stuff together. And believe it or not, it was hours, just a few hours, and I got an email and yeah, he'd done it. Absolutely amazing. I just couldn't believe it. I just thought it'd be a nice idea that we can have things tidy rather than having to have a splitter up here to split the signals and do things. Yeah, we've got this handy little through so we can daisy chain stuff together, which is really, really nice. So we have our in. Obviously, we've got our out ports. And what this knob does, actually, well, before we talk about the knob, and we are sort of talking about the knob really, if I have an input, and then we've got number 1 configured, and then I'm going to switch to number 2, so I've now changed my program number. Well, what are we doing with the signal on number 1? What are we going to do? It had a signal there, which might have been plus 1 volt. What is that signal now? Well, it actually drops to 0. So as default, it drops to 0. I requested a little knob that we could actually set what that default value is, and that's what this is. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, the values that I'm really, really interested in is -127, which, as I said, this is in the MIDI world, these figures, so that's -1 volt. And as you say, you can sort of change it to what you want. And it also goes up to 127, which would be +1 volt. So the 3 figures, without a doubt, I'm really interested in is -1, 0, and 1. Because off the top of my head, I know for a fact I'm going to be having these going out to AB switches and a few other bits and bobs, and they need minus voltage. So when I switch away, it means I could turn that switch off and do something else. So not just having a 0, but having a negative voltage, as well as obviously that full volt. I can see you using this a lot. So it's great. So we can decide what that base value is going to be when we switch to a new port, and vice versa, and go on and on. I say as default, it switches to 0, and 0 is not a bad default. I'll be using the defaults quite a lot, but it's just handy to be able to, switch. Right next to these ports, we've actually got a little light, and it's a memo, which is for memory. Let's just switch a few of these on. So basically, with the memo on, and we can actually set this dial, and I'll come back to that in a minute. With the memo on, if I've come along with my signal, and let's say I've got 0.5 of a volt, so I've got 0.5 of a volt going out of that, when I switch to this port, rather than it dropping to 0 or drop into whatever value we decided we want to drop it to, it's going to hold that 0.5 of the volt. And we can change, obviously, the value, because the value now could be 0.25 of a volt, and that's what this one is. So then when we switch again, this is 0.5 of a volt, this is 0.25 of a volt, and this might be minus 5 volt now, because we're obviously changing the input, say minus whatever. So it's a memory. It remembers the last, basically the last CV signal it has sent out. When you switch away, it's going to hold it. So you may have had a little think there, or your brain might be going, oh, hang on a second. And yep, you're absolutely right. If I was to put a random signal in here, and I could easily put an LFO on this Arcus, or we can do LFOs, we can do all sorts of things. And we was to switch. I've effectively built myself a track/sample and hold device, an 8-way track/sample and hold device. I refer to it as a track/sample because it all comes down to, with these kind of devices, and I did that video about my AB switch, and I showed how I use that as a sample and hold device. It's all these devices, and where's my AB switch, and I know I stressed it, it works for slow moving values. When you're getting into really, really high speed, you've got to use yourself a proper sample and hold device. Something like the dual CV source is quite a good one. That's got a real nice sample and hold device on it. So it doesn't matter how fast the signal is, we can actually hold a very, very specific value. Track and hold means, because the gate, I could switch to this, my signal's going that fast, that it's gone through quite a lot, well, that'll all go out of that port. So not just one value's gone out of it, all these values until I switch away, and then it'll hold that last value. So that's why I kind of refer to these as track/sample and hold devices. They are a Heath Robinson one. Sorry, Heath Robinson is an English term, which means it's a bit of a bodge. So we're making it do something which it isn't designed to. But you could do that. You can actually easily do that. And I've actually done that. I've actually already put a random signal in, and I tested it out and said, yeah, it does work. That's one for the back burner, because you never know the day I might need to use that. So that's the basics of the back. The only other little thing is, if I've got a memo on and I've set this, say, to -1 volt, if I've had, say, plus 0.5 of a volt come in, this is holding plus 0.5 of a volt. And in fact, this one's actually on 0. And let's say I change that signal and this one's holding -1 volt. So we've got 0.5 of a volt plus, and we've got -1 volt going out that next port. On the front, there happens to be another little button, which I haven't spoken about over here, called clean. When I hit that button, that like cleans the memory. So this one will default to -1 because that's what I've set it to. And this one will default to 0. So it'll forget the memory and it'll default to its base value. And all these rest of these will default to 0 because that's what the knob's set to. So whatever your knob's set to, that's what it's going to default to. Sorry, I cut the video there. I don't usually like cutting my videos, but that actual video did actually go on for another 2 hours and 20 minutes because I actually went off and built a generative piece. However, when I went back and looked through it, it was a lot of stop, start, obviously because it was a very big project. And however, I've got an idea now that my next set of videos, I'm going to do like I did with my mini modular series, I'm going to do like a mini series on generative and how the different bits add together, and we'll build a generative project with that. Just to finalise on the set CV out though, one thing I haven't really spoken about is poly and note and CV data. Basically exactly the same rules apply to the select program video I did, so I really would recommend to watch that. yes, we can push poly through this. It's not really recommended to push your note and gate data, normal note and gate data CV through this. The only other thought that came to mind, which I haven't touched on, is you may look at this and suddenly have a brainwave of saying, oh, I'm going to have an input, I'm going to put my through back into my B, and so you effectively got a 1 in and you've got yourself a 16 out. Just bear in mind, if you do configure it this way, you are going to give yourself CV latency because you've created yourself a loopback on a device. If you don't know about CV latency, I have done a video, but very, very quickly, I can just very, very quickly demonstrate it here. As you can see, I've got a signal coming in. That signal is actually going back out again, and it's going back to my latency monitor over here, which is a little bit of a Heath Robinson latency monitor I built because the VMG1 is for audio, so I convert the audio into CV through and back into CV to audio and then back into the VGN01. So when I push my measure button, and because this device is pre-10.3, because pre-10.3 you had an internal buffer size in reason of 64. Obviously after 10.3 we can set whatever buffer size we want. So on my DX driver right now, being DX drivers, the buffer size is something like 2000. It is 2048. So what I have to do when I look at this figure, I have to add 64 onto it, which will actually come to 2048, minus my buffer size, which is 2048, so it'd be 0. So I've got 0 latency going through. If I was to take this wire here and just pull it onto the bottom one, so the signal is now going in, it's going to the through, into the B, and now it's coming out. And if we had a quick look at that figure, you can see it's now 4032. So 4032 plus my 64 minus my buffer size, which happens to be 2048, would equal 2048. The latency that you're always going to cause when you do a loop back to the same device will be your buffer size. And just in case you're looking at this thinking, well, why am I seeing these funny figures and why am I having to add 64 on? It's because internally, as I said, because pre-10.3 it was 64, so internally they built it so it'd automatically take off the buffer size, because this itself, if I didn't go anywhere else and loops back to itself, I've created a loop back even to itself. So with a measuring piece of kit, because you've created your own loop back, you've got to take that measurement off, which was hard coded to 64, so they've hard coded it to 64. As I say, we can have our own buffer size. That's why we have to add the 64 on minus our buffer size to get the true figure. If, say for instance, you really did want to have multiple outs, well, no problem. What you can do here, and what I'm going to do here is, as you can see, rather than me going to this through, I'm going to take this out and I'm going to put it into this one here. This in is going to this through, which is actually coming to this in, that through. So I'm missing the B port altogether. So let me take my test signal, or my return test signal, put it right down the bottom here, and the result we should really see would be 1984. What a good year. There we go. 1984 plus my 64 minus my buffer size, 0. We haven't created a loop back to the same device. We've gone from one device to another, which is totally different. And if you want a lot more explanation of this, again, I've done another video called about CV latency, which really does go into a lot more details about all these different kind of loopbacks and what to look for. The main issue with CV loopbacks is if you notice it big time on drums, because obviously the timing is just thrown out. So that's the one place you really do notice it big time. A lot of time with a lot of CV stuff we do, it doesn't matter if you've got that bit of CV latency. It really, you don't notice the effect, put it that way. So that really does bring me to the conclusion or the end of this video to do with the set CV out. What I'm going to leave you with now is the end result of this 2-hour session I did using this, and basically this I've used, which would be doing lots of switching, and it's switching between, I can't remember how many I actually used in that demonstration, probably about 10 different grains or 12 grains, and I've got some other bits and bobs going on as well. So that's just going to play out, and hope to see you in my next video. I'm going to say bye for now.